at Bonneville, except to that small niche of people who maybe cared a little bit about how fast an Indian motorcycle might go. So everybody's got their own goals in life, and Tom enabled me to achieve a goal. I think the fastest I've run in an 8-field dragster is probably 276 or 277, but that particular run outdid all of them.
Yeah, now at that event that Jimmy's putting on at Cordova with the front end dragster, also Joe Haas and John Lawson be driving the two funny cars up there.
Yeah, those are awesome cars.
Oh yeah.
They buy their fuel from us, so I get I love being kind of in the fuel business at DSR. If nothing else, I get to talk with Lawson and Moultrie and Jimmy and all these people that buy fuel from us. It just kind of gives me a chance to stay in touch, and certainly gives me the incentive to stay in touch online and see how they're doing. And of course, I wish I was still out there with them, but I'll never regret the time that I spent, at Bowling Green and LaRue, Ohio, and Bristol, and all the places that we've raced together. I mean, that's a strong core group of people that I really respect. The way they race with each other, there's no animosity. They're old-fashioned racers. They do whatever they can to help each other, and it's not like that everywhere. We had an experience in Bakersfield that really reminded me of old school drag racing, where at fairly late in the 2014 season, I had a chance to drive the Nitro Nick car for Randy Lucchetti and Cecil Matthews at the reunion. And this was a car that had made a few 580 runs, but they were new to Nitro. Anthony DeCero put it together, and he went out to help tune the car. And I literally got there on a Friday, and we qualified at, somewhere middle of the afternoon on that Friday. I didn't even know the last names of all these guys yet. And it was a neat California group. California racers, at an event like that, there's 6, 8, or 10 people in every pit. It's not like back here where maybe 2 guys take a car and go race it. It's brothers and sisters and cousins and neighbors and friends that are just out there, and if they're not working on the car, they're cooking burgers. But we put the rods out and blew the body off of it on the first run. So I've got a convertible with a blown engine, and I've turned off the track, and I'm thinking, man, I don't even know these guys. And they weren't deterred. They said, we got another motor. I don't know what we're going to do about a body, but we got another motor. And about that time, a guy named Lawton Ferreira and his son Lot from San Diego walked up and introduced themselves, and they race in the nostalgia class. But they also run a Corvette repair shop, and they know how to fix fiberglass. The entire right side of the body, the words Nitro Nick, were 100 yards away from the rest of the body. But he said, we can fix this. And they said, yeah, right. How are you going to do that? He said, well, let me show you. And underneath the body was this template that you could see where all the pieces had fit together before. He said it's going to take a lot of sheet metal and a lot of rivets and then some Bondo, but we're going to start around the back of the roll cage and we'll work our way to the front, and then we'll put this piece on the right side, and it may not be pretty, but it should fit on the car and you should be able to run tomorrow. Well, we weren't qualified. We only had one shot left, and Vicki and I were there together, my wife, and we counted 18 people working in this car. And by 1 o'clock in the morning, it was on a body stand. The Bondo was all wet, but that was all we could do, and we came back on that Saturday morning to see if it fit the chassis, and it did. So we warmed it up, and we were the last car in line to run, and we actually qualified 11th. And those 18 people became friends for life. I still hear from those people, see those people, and it's not like a handshake. I mean, these big old boys hug you when they see you, and it was just amazing. And then first round, we raced Chris Crable, who was trying to win the Heritage Championship. And by God, we beat him on a hole shot. So that was a pretty incredible experience. That was teamwork. And that's something, I won't say you won't see that at the big show. You're probably not going to, except within DSR or within Coletta. You will over at Torrance or Scott Palmer's, where a lot of teams may come together. But that's just the way it used to be, where people just did whatever they could to help out. And the only satisfaction was seeing that car back on the racetrack. And it was, I'm looking at pictures of it. It was an experience I'll never forget.
Yeah, last year I interviewed the current driver of the Nitro Nick car, Matt Bynum.
Yeah. Matt's a good guy.
Yeah.
He does a heck of a job in that car, and Randy and Cecil really learned how to tune that car. And I mean, it's typically the top speed car at those events out there. It's not it's usually, at least in the semifinals, and Matt does a great job.
Yeah, you're talking about all the nostalgia and all that. A lot of nostalgia people I interview, they always say nostalgia is more of like one great big family compared to the big show.
It's a brotherhood.
Yeah, everyone they'll give parts after card to the other brother. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If someone needs something, they'll help them out. Yeah, big show is more corporate.
Of course it is. It's a full-time career. It's the difference between, I won't say, a pickup baseball game and a major league game, but if you're playing baseball and you're being paid to do it, and you have a level of expectation that if it's not met, could cost you your job, as opposed to being on a nostalgia car where you race periodically, sometimes only 2 or 3 times a year, and sometimes a little more often. But you're part of a group of guys that are basically volunteering.
Right.
You do it because you love it, and if the day turns out really well, when we won Bakersfield in 2012, I think the next time I got in a car was 8 or 10 months later. I mean, so you have a lot of time to enjoy that. Unfortunately, the following year I lost in a hole shot. So you have a lot of time, to lose sleep over it, and you can't wait to get back and redeem yourself. But that's just part of it. If I had the opportunity to race again, if we could run a really good car once a month, that would be outstanding. If I was independently wealthy and had nothing else to do, I'd probably want to make a lot more laps. But that's not, that's not reality. I've been blessed with the opportunity to meet the people I've met and to experience the sport from pretty much all different angles. But there's nothing like the excitement of strapping in a car that's competitive. And I swear to God, when we were doing well in Bakersfield that year, and I'd look at Paul Smith. Paul was the crew chief standing in front of the car. And I've known Paul, since, the 70s. And here's Paul Smith, the crew chief in a car, and I get to drive this thing. The smile inside my helmet, I mean, you'd have seen nothing but teeth from ear to ear. And that's how exciting it was to be able to drive that car in Bakersfield with those people around me. And the same thing with Tom Conway's car. Once you build confidence, we've had some good rides with Anthony DeCero. I've had some good rides, with a number of other people. That Nitro Nick team, just seeing those guys and realizing after we qualified that we started to believe in each other, we could really do this. And then went out and knocked off Chris Crable first round. It was a truly exciting team experience. I'll never forget that camaraderie, to share it with my wife, who Nikki loves the sport, but it's new to her. Unlike, a lot of us that have spent 40 years and we've grown up with it. She met me, and I took her to a few races and told her that someday I'm going to drive one of these things, and she said, okay, and that obviously if I get to race, she wants to be there, and she just lights up my life, and it's the last thing I see before I, pull around the corner to start the engine is she'll blow me a kiss, and I'll say my prayer, and I'll kind of consider all of that, and that's just such a unique place in life to be, and I'll relate to, the only place I can compare it to is opening the jump door at 2 miles high and being about to exit an aircraft with a parachute. It's an incredible experience. Glad I had the opportunity. If it never happens again, trust me, I can think of almost every single run I've ever made and close my eyes and bring it back to life.
No, it could be a kind of a neat event to run would be the Funny Car Chaos event.
It absolutely would, yeah. If I was still driving a car somewhere, I'd love to go be a part of it. But I love following that event online. People are so good about broadcasting it on Facebook Live or whatever. It doesn't matter where I'm at. If I've got a few free minutes, I'm going to check into what's happening in Amarillo or Central Ohio or Central Illinois. It's a great concept. It's had great support. And Chris and Tara have done a really good job putting it together, but I really appreciate the fact that all the teams have rallied to support them. Great event.
Yeah. Then you got Randy Renew from Redline Shirts, big sponsor for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's only 8th mile, it's still a neat event.
I was scheduled to drive Tom Moultrie's car. Joe Haas was, I think, at a wedding, and so that would have been in the summer of 15, June of 15, I think. We were going to take Tom's car to Central Illinois, and we knew it was short. I don't know if anyone had ever gone 200 there. We knew we'd have to be on our toes, but I was really excited. I've never raced an 8 mile, and if somebody says all you can do is go over there and do a burnout, well, count me in. I'll be over there and do the best burnout I can. But it rained that night, and they called it off, so we didn't get to do that.
Yeah, it's a Funny Car Chaos. It's cool. You can bring any funny car you got, as long as it's a funny car, and so you could get your nitro guy going against alcohol.
Yeah. And it's perfect. You don't want to do that at a national event facility with national event prep. It's almost like, Street Outlaws, and there are no prep shows where it doesn't so much matter, if you've got twin turbos or whatever, if you can make your car perform on whatever the surface is on a given day, you go out there, and if you make the best run, you turn on the wind light. But to do that with funny cars is really a cool concept, and like I say, I hope the fans appreciate it as much as the racers do. It may not be a concept that would work as well at Indy as it will at a track where people are just starved to see burnouts and flames and just a really good show with good, solid racers that love putting on a good show.
Yeah, some dry hopping.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember when my dad first started taking me to watch draggers, I used to watch the Snake and Mongoose and all them do the dry hopping.
Yeah. That wasn't anything that we were able to do and run any of the cars I've driven competitively. But man, I'd love to do a couple of dry hops with the Brand X car if we had a chance. Or the last I drove that car, we put the Red Jungle Gym body on it before we lost Henry. Those cars cried out for dry hops.
Yeah, a lot of people complain about the Big Show, saying they missed the long smoky burnouts and dry hop and all that stuff.
It's bizarre. I look at a lot of photographs and video and stuff of the burnouts we used to do, the nitro cars used to do, and then Ryan, I don't know, Hughley with his Tiki Warrior, the guys with the Detroit Tiger. They can still do some pretty darn good burnouts. And I think they just run a little more RPM, and maybe the tires on the nostalgia cars are built for burnouts. I don't know what it is. I miss the fact that we do these burnouts and we go through the motions, and there's not a whole lot of smoke. The old days were fun. They were really fun, and the front engine car days back. Probably the best burnout I ever did was in front of a veterans hospital in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, and it was filled with Vietnam War vets. So we had special clearance. There was a big, long hospital wing that was probably 4 or 5 stories tall, and kind of a curved road through the parking area, but then maybe a 800-foot straight, maybe a 600-foot straightaway road. So we got permission to do a burnout there for the soldiers. And I didn't have a whole lot of room by the time we started the car and poured the water. Man, we lit them up. And by the time we stopped, I think I had my front tires in the bushes at the end of the road. I wish I had photographs of that day, but it was fun to do real burnouts. And this conversation allowed me to revisit something I hadn't thought of for a long time, but that was my favorite burnout ever.
Yeah, another neat thing about years ago was when all the funny cars would put their own names on the car instead of sponsors' names. They're like Snake, Mongoose, Chi-Town Hustler, and all that. Yeah.
Yep. We were lucky to live through that era, and we were lucky that there was enough crowd support that Snake, Mongoose, Jungle, Brutus, all of those racers would be able to make a pretty good living, but it was a hard lifestyle, and there's kind of a charm to thinking about, rolling your car up on a ramp truck and then grabbing your coffee and driving 1,000 miles to make 3 runs, and then changing the oil and servicing the car, and then driving 500 miles to make 3 more runs. And when I think back to the people that used to come to Maple Grove, typically, if we had an 8-car show, we'd have half of the cars maybe fairly close. Jungle was close. Lou Warrington was close. There was a bunch of cars in Jersey and Maryland, but we'd always have a couple of touring cars. And I recall Richard Tharp bringing the Blue Max to Maple Grove by himself. I don't recall if it was a Wednesday show or a Saturday show, but he arrived by himself, made his runs, napped in the truck in between runs, made his 3rd run, came for his paycheck, and then drove to Epping, New Hampshire to do it again the next day. So if he was lucky, he got to sleep a little bit Sunday night and Monday night, work on the car a little Tuesday, and then probably had somewhere to be on Wednesday. And he was by himself. So it's not like these days where, you could fly to the races and 2 guys drive each truck, and, you get there a day early and set up and go to dinner and make a couple of runs, then go to dinner. It was a different lifestyle, and sleep was almost an option.
Yeah.
But we did it.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, though, we're lucky enough to be able to witness those old days of drag racing.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Now, with the Big Show cars, wouldn't you agree that most of the cars look the same these days? Like with nostalgia, you still got your different styles of bodies. Big Show, almost all of them look the same.
They're pretty close. I don't care what brand of motorsport you look at. The the things that used to change. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the front engine cars. I remember the forerunners to the funny cars, the alternate wheelbase cars and all that stuff. So the changes you would see from one year to the next were dramatic and exciting, almost like the Indy 500 going from the roadsters to the turbines to the rear engine cars and all that sort of thing. As time goes on, the changes become more and more subtle and much more, the tolerances and everything have tightened. And there's no way to really avoid that. There's got to be a limit on technical limitations, or the cars will be going 400 miles an hour and flying off into who knows where. So things have really gotten to be very precise. So if you want to see the difference between one of our Hellcat funny cars or Force's Chevy funny cars or whatever, the same basic shape exists. But there's still some subtle things that you can see. The scallop on the Dodge Hellcat, the round roof on the Camaros. All these things make a difference. Every one of the engineers on the teams working with their corporate brands are trying to push the envelope a little bit, and NHRA is trying to not allow anyone to go to have an advantage. And I think right now, NHRA has done a pretty good job. And I think on a given day, any brand can go out there and compete successfully if the crew chief has the right tune-up and all the other parts. And all of those other parts, by the way, from the supercharger to the manifolds to the header angles and the clutch systems, and the difference from one to another is so microscopic, and yet that microscopic difference can produce a successful run versus a little bit of tire shake. It was fun back when you could take a big swing, and put a half-inch stroker engine or crank in a 392 as opposed to running a stock stroke crank, or putting an 871 or a 1071 or ultimately up to 1471, or trying different things. And as you'll recall, there were times that people used fuels in addition to nitro. And a lot of times things didn't work out so well. But we live in an era now where I'm grateful, for 1,000-foot racing. I'm grateful that we've got 6-point roll cages and cars that are built with 7-way seat harnesses and helmets that are made of carbon fiber and molded to a driver's head. I'm glad that when things go wrong, that there's a much better chance that a driver can get out and walk away. And I respect the fact that every one of these drivers, that they may not have families, but most of them do. They've got responsibilities. They've got lives that, I want everyone to live a full life that's not ever cut short by an accident. I don't ever want to see someone go through what Daryl Quinn's been able to go through, and Kenny Logan on the West Coast. And God, my heart bleeds for these people, and yet they're so strong and proud. I'm really proud of them and proud to know what they've been able to accomplish. But I want to see people be able to race and survive to go on and do other things when the racing days are over. Right.
Yeah, the cars can always be replaced, but the life cannot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so now, Mike, when you first started getting into drag racing, were there any drivers that were inspirational to you out there?
Were there any drivers that what?
That were inspirational to you?
Yeah, they were all inspirational in one way or another. Jungle Jim became pretty close, and I wasn't one of the guys that he'd hang out with at midnight. My lifestyle was always fairly calm and routine, but still he and I had a really good relationship. And when he called to book his car or talk about a race, it was always after midnight. I mean, I'd be sound asleep, and I didn't even have to ask, who's this? I'd just say, what do you need, Jungle? Don Garlits has always been an inspiration. And I talk with him. I mean, I've never been so intimidated in my life. I booked him the first year that I ran Maple Grove. And in those days, you know, Tommy Lemons would bring the car in and work at the hotel. Garlits needed a ride from the Philadelphia airport, so I had a pickup truck that we were using to tow our race car, and it was not first class. So I borrowed my mom's Pontiac Le Mans, and I drove to Philadelphia, and it was just an hour and 15 minutes or so back to Reading. But man, it's me and Big Daddy, and he can be pretty intense. But he was pretty. I mean, we had a nice talk, and then he took a little. I don't know if he had his eyes closed or not. I'll never know that. But he got real quiet, and I just kind of assumed that he was going to close his eyes. We drove back there, but he was almost every time he came to Maple Grove, he'd reset track records. And there was a period of time that he'd make a deal, and I just talked with him about this last summer. He'd run his car, in those days, in the early 70s, might be $2,000 to make 3 runs. But he made a deal. He said, if you give me $500 in face value silver, then I'll do it. I think, well, that sounds like a heck of a deal. And you go to a coin smith or whatever, and it had to be 1964 or earlier, pure silver coins. And I'd get these 2 bags, and I'd bring them out to Maple Grove, and it would cost maybe $1,800. So we'd save a little bit of money, and he probably wrote $500 as income on his taxes. But anyway, he made these runs. On the way out, I walk up, and I gave him these 2 big bags of cash. I mean, pure silver cash. He said, thank you, and he drove off. Didn't count it, didn't weigh it, just shook my hand. I was about 24 maybe at that time. So I told him what an impression that made on me later in my years, that he would trust us enough to know that we were being honest. And he said, oh, and by the way, that those 2 bags, I still got them. So, I mean, here's a guy who was probably the greatest racer of all time, who was a pretty darn good businessman, too. And not necessarily, you know, I mean, you couldn't necessarily compare him to a Don Schumacher or a Tom McEwen who did it through marketing. Don was pretty good at marketing himself and had pretty good support from Dodge and Kendall and all his sponsors. But he was just really good at planning his budgets, planning his events, planning everything. So he could be home when he had the opportunity with Pat and his kids, travel to the races, make sure he had... he didn't have 2 guys. He had Tommy Lemons taking his car and servicing the car, so when he got there, they could go run the car, and man, he ran it hard. I mean, I've been impressed by a lot of people for a lot of years, for a lot of reasons, and if you gave me 24 hours, I probably couldn't get through all of them. So yeah, I've been inspired by a lot of people.
Now, how about a guy that's still out there like Chris the Greek Karamessinis?
I keep a couple of those little those little Werthers. Chris always has a pocket full of them. So I always keep a couple just as a reminder. He's amazing. The fact that a man at his age can still run 300 miles an hour, and that's pretty amazing. But he still drives the tow car to and from the races. And Bob Stangy's a good friend, so Stangy, whenever he's got rear ends for us, or whenever we need rear ends to go up to Stangy and be serviced, more often than not, the Greek will take his minivan and make an Indy shuttle run, and I just love the guy. I've known him. We raced in Tulsa in 1972, and I think we raced Greek first round out there, and he beat us. But when I first saw him in the magazines, I see this guy in those days with dark curly hair and that mustache, and I think, man, this I wouldn't want to mess around with this dude. Then you meet him, and he's just as nice as anybody you've ever met. And he hasn't changed a bit. And I just think he's authentic. He's the real deal. He's living his life on his terms. And, I love the guy. He's a great guy and a great friend. I just hope that he's safe. I know he wants to race again this year. We finally put a new front end on that car last year. And he made a couple of good runs in it. And I've always kind of wished that the day would come where, even for just one pass, he could climb in Tony's car and run a 370. But I love the guy, and I'm impressed with what he's done. He's certainly been good for the sport. Amazing guy.
Yeah. Now, Mike, what would you say have been what have been the milestones of your drag racing career?
Geez, I don't know that that's for me to say from the outside looking in. From where I sit, the things I'm most proud of. I'm looking at a trophy from Bakersfield, which was my greatest achievement on the track. I'm sitting next to a lady who's my wife. We didn't meet each other until we were both on the back nine, but we spent a great life together, and that means more to me than anything. And our Indianapolis family includes, four not great grandkids. I'm not ready for great kids. 4 terrific grandkids. So I love my family. I love my friends. Probably the most pivotal day in my life was the day my grandfather asked me to announce. And instead of just being involved from kind of a distance and just being fascinated by the people in the cars, he challenged me in a way that forced me, or that inspired me to challenge myself. And being able to conquer the fear of public speaking has served me well from a career standpoint. So I've got to go back to that day, and that certainly was a milestone day. When I look at Maple Grove, our Super Chevy events were the biggest anywhere in the country. And they spawned an event that we produced ourselves called the Ford Motorsport Nationals. And it was an event that we did with 168 Ford dealers through the Philadelphia District Advertising Group. And I'm probably more proud of that event than any event we ever did. We sold over 1,000 new cars at the track that were pre-ordered by the Ford dealers, delivered to the track, serviced and prepped, picked up by the eventual buyers at the track. At an event where Bill Elliott and Bigfoot and Kyle Petty and the Glidden family, and they were annual visitors. We made a fair amount of money doing it, but it was really good for the Ford dealers. I'm proud of some things like that have probably, as time goes on, those things are kind of forgotten, and that's okay. Time passes on, and we all live in a world that's kind of defined by what you've done lately. So at DSR, I think I'm proud that we were able to take, through some relationships we built in of all places, the Persian Gulf. We took Top Fuel drag racing to Abu Dhabi, and if you can imagine a track that was beautifully built with an almost unlimited budget, primarily for Formula One, but they built a drag strip as well. And then Don and I went over there, and we made a deal to build them 2 Top Fuel operations, and with Lee Beard kind of supervising the assembly and the construction. We put all of this together and went over there with 2 18-wheelers filled as if we were going to the U.S. Nationals. Race cars, backup cars, 6 motors in each trailer. Tommy Johnson and Rod Fuller were the drivers, and on a track that was a virgin concrete track. We worked with Chad Head, and Penn Holland took over all the equipment to prep the track. One of those big counter-rotating tire machines. We took all of that to Abu Dhabi, and the first side-by-side run down that track was 387 to 380. I mean, they were both in the 380s, and that was an amazing thrill just to see an entire country welcome us. And on one block in downtown Abu Dhabi was about a 2-story tall countdown clock. Countdown to, I forget what they called their Formula One event, but it was the grand finale of the Formula One season. And this great big countdown, months and days and weeks and hours and minutes and seconds. And I thought, wow, if only our sport could get to that point. So we drove another block, and there we were, the USA Drag Festival, the same countdown clock, and it was much closer because we were now 4 or 5 days away from running Top Fuel in Abu Dhabi. We had made friends with the son of the Crown Prince, Sheikh Salman Al Khalifa, was in charge of the Bahrain circuit, and almost took funny cars and motorcycles there, except when we asked for a profilograph of the track, it was a little bumpy. So we worked with Chad Head, Penn Hall, and set the equipment over there, and they fixed the track. But in the meantime, we were introduced to the people at Yas Marina in Abu Dhabi, and actually did put a deal together and followed through over there. So while I'm doing English commentary along with an Arabic announcer in Abu Dhabi, I get a phone call from Sheikh Salman. So I put the microphone down, and I'm talking with him, and I realize he's downstairs. He had come to see us in Abu Dhabi. So I'm proud that we were able to put all of that together and introduce drag racing to a part of the world that a lot of people tend to avoid. And what we found was a beautiful culture and beautiful people and wonderful friends. And using our sport as sort of a common denominator, I mean, was a great way to learn more about their culture as well. I mean, they brought busloads of kids out there on classroom field trips to see Top Fuel dragsters. And the other 70 or 80 cars that are already based over there, some of which are pretty sophisticated. So that was a great experience.
Yeah, that had been a memory of a lifetime, Mike.
I bet. I've got some photographs of it that mean the world. We still communicate on occasion. Was walking in Norwalk the last time that we ran up there on the 4th of July, and I got a text message, and I looked down. It was from Sheikh Salman from Bahrain. Happy Independence Day, my friend. Enjoy your day. Well, no sooner did I get this message from Bahrain, Khalid Al-Balushi walked by, and I said, Khalid, I've got to answer Sheikh Salman. What's the chance you could, I'll tell you what to say, but you put it in Arabic, text it to me, I'll copy it and paste it so I can answer him in Arabic. And within 10 minutes, I sent my Arabic reply, and I mean, we had a really good, because everybody over in the Persian Gulf knows Balushi. So that was kind of cool. And then I realized it's a good thing I trust him, because I have no idea. I know what I told him to say. I have no idea what I was reading in Arabic. And I sent it to a member of the royal family of Bahrain. But we've had a lot of fun with a lot of great people from all over the world. And from the Rabasardas in Australia, we visited, we've got partners in Sandvik in Sweden. DSR has become a global operation, and I'm proud to have not just been along for the ride, but I think maybe I've made a few introductions along the way too that helped to make that happen.
Yeah, that's awesome, Mike. So now, what would you consider to be the most embarrassing moment in your drag racing career?
Oh boy, there's two. We raced. The only time I ran Indy was in Tom Conway's car in '09. We qualified third, a couple of thousandths off of Bill Reichert, Jim Whiteley, beat Courtney Force first round. And second round, Conway had really zoned in on his tune-up. And I red-lighted on a run where we set low ET and top speed beside Dwayne Shields, who broke. That's about knowing that working for DSR, I can't take time off and race a car at Indy. But Don let me do it that year and encouraged me, and here was my chance to have the best car in the top alcohol class. And when we ran 5:21 on that run, we set low ET of the event by probably 500ths of a second. And I red-lighted.
Wow.
The other one, that was a pretty heartbreaking day. And the other one was in Bakersfield the year after we won. And not a lot of people know this, but I think enough time's gone by to sort of come clean. We took two cars out there like we had the previous year. Bodie Smith drove the blue Jungle Jim car, and I drove the Brand X car. The Brand X car, for some reason, always seemed to outperform the other car by a little bit. So we qualified with a 581 or something. It was decent. I mean, I think we ended up 11th or something. And we went to make our second run and broke the rear end, put the rods out almost like we did 2 years later in that Nitro Nick car. So this was on the Saturday about 2 hours before round one. The Jungle car didn't qualify. So we've got one car that's not qualified, another car that's qualified, but the rear end's out of it, the motor's out of it, and the two rear ends aren't interchangeable. We can't even borrow parts from the blue car to rebuild the Brand X car, and we don't have nearly enough time. So we took the car that didn't qualify and the body on the car that did qualify and put the Brand X body on the Jungle Jim car and thought, let's see if it fits. And with a little modification, it did. So we went to the staging lanes to Race Cruz Petragon and beat him. And next round, that was on Saturday night, and then Sunday, beside John Hale, I'm sitting in the car thinking that we're in deep doo-doo if anyone finds out what we've done. So at a time when I should be concentrating on my lights, I'm thinking about some altogether different things. And anyway, he rolls in deep. I'm dead late. I run a 577. He runs 580 something and wins. And I intentionally didn't pull the chutes because I knew everybody would be congregating at one turnout, and I wanted to go down where none of the tech guys would pay a lot of attention to our car. And then it hit me that, I drove the thing out the back door and almost caught him. And I had a feeling, I knew my light wasn't good, but I didn't realize how bad it was or how much better we ran than he ran. And all of a sudden you just get smacked in the face that the guys that are working to put you out there, I let them down. I lost. It was second round, so at least we got to race a little bit, but I lost to John Hale in a run where I should have beat him. And nobody could ever quite understand where my head was at of the starting line, because my lights are normally pretty good. But the true story is, if I had won that round or another round, somebody would have figured out that we're not running the same car that we qualified. So when it's all said and done, I did what I had to do, but it was heartbreaking. Any time that as a driver you let down the rest of the team, it's crushing. It's totally, absolutely crushing. And I guess maybe a little bit, like a football player that misses a field goal in the final seconds of the game or drops a pass or something like that. I let my guys down. We had a car that should have won, should have beat John Hale. We didn't. Um, and that's, I mean, I've had my greatest thrills in a drag strip in a car, and I've had my greatest disappointments also in a car. And I shouldn't say that. That's not true. I mean, obviously, the greatest disappointments